So, Zaccharie Risacher, who is this international man of mystery who college basketball fans will not have seen or heard of? Um, he plays for French team JL Bourg. He has started the season this year. He's 19 years old. French national, plays for the French national team. Actually born in Spain, where his dad was a former professional basketball player. He played for the French national team. He played for the EuroLeague in the EuroLeague as well. So another son of a pro, which I always like in my draft prospects. You know he's going to be brought up around good coaching, a good approach. He is a 6'9". I think he's 6'10", 6'11". That's how he looks on film to me. But 6'9", 6'10", long, rangy wing. Not a kind of a dribbler, not a passer, but a extremely versatile defender. Really gets after it on that end, and an excellent outside shooter. We're shooting above 50% for more than half this season at France. They're still playing. Their season's still going right now. They're fighting for a playoff spot in the French league, but he's now just, I think, in the high 40s or the mid 40s after a second half of the year shooting slump. So for number places, ESPN, we should point out, has Zaccharie Risacher as the number one prospect in their mock draft right now. So we could be talking about someone who is a viable number one pick right now. Where we have him on our boards, we'll get into that in a little bit. But Chase, what part of Risacher's game do you want to start with kind of breaking down for our scout?
So I think that when you look at him as a prospect, if you're just watching highlights or if you're taking like an actual deep dive into the film, the first thing you're going to notice with him is his shooting. Whether you believe in it or not, you like it, you think he's a good shooter right now, or he will be eventually. That's probably the thing that most people are going to take a notice to first. So why don't we start there?
Let's start there. And look, the percentages will tell you he's a good shooter, right? You don't need to worry too much. I will say, like, before this season, he was not thought of to be a great shooter. He shot it okay for the French team in FIBA, the under-21s or the under-19s that he played for this summer. At the Hoop Summit last year, I believe I've spoken to various people who are at practices at the Hoop Summit and in the game itself, and he didn't shoot a great ball, kind of looked a little bit shy. But I would say that is not anything what you've seen this year. He is an extremely confident gunner. He really lets it go. He likes to shoot from the corners. And he is a super, super quick release. Flashes some really deep range, even has some step backs and side step threes. And what I've really noticed, and this is something that not many prospects I've scouted with his size, I've seen do this at his age. He is like a no-dip three. So he'll catch the ball above his shoulders and just do like a Sam Hauser, just like fire it up there. And that is something that normally good shooters do not develop until like their mid-20s. And this kid is 19 and he's doing that. He is really good shot prep, quick footwork, no dip, kind of gets it off quickly, and he's got super size. So I didn't see this thing ever getting blocked. He even hits some like back pedal threes when he comes off stagger screens to make sure he gets behind the arc. His shooting, even though he didn't have a reputation coming into the year, I'm saying, Jace, I am all in on him being on a three-point threat just because of the gradient of difficulty that he takes, and the fact that his coach is okay for him to do that at 19 shows that like he must have proven to his teammates and his coaches that like this is just what he does. This is how he should. These are the types of shots he should be taking. So for that reason, I am pretty sold on the shooting. I expect him to be his pretty much signature skill in the NBA is to be a guy who can not just shoot the three ball well, but get to it in a variety of ways.
And you mentioned at the end there that wasn't really like the word on him coming into the season and coming out of the FIBA. Right, exactly. Like coming out of the FIBA U19 tournament this past summer, it was like the playmaking flashes and like kind of ball handling going downhill was maybe the most intriguing thing about him. And in many cases, people had him in like the mid-20s or like as high as maybe the late lottery was like about as high as people were on him. He has rocketed up draft boards with the type of shooting display that he's put on this year. I will say, though, I'm confident in the shooting, but I'm probably still not as confident in it as you are. I'm just not sure that he's quite as good enough of an athlete to really leverage it in the way that he does in the French league. And there's a couple reasons for that. But first of all, I don't think he has any sort of ability to shoot off of the dribble unless it's like a pump fake, sidestep, step back type of thing right now.
Yeah.
That is where that that's where that kind of trips me up a little bit, because that is a valuable skill. I totally agree. Even if that never comes along, he could still be a very good shooter. But then if you draft him really anywhere inside the top 10, I think then it becomes a big risk on that type of stuff panning out. In the French league this year on dribble jumpers, he's shooting 36.8% on 38 attempts. That's A, not a super high volume, and B, a pretty average percentage, I would say, especially
and
in
I think a lot of those were twos as well. I don't think there'll be many free attempts in there. A lot of them will be pull-up twos. He likes to use the glass for little pull-ups and sometimes fade away or turn round his right shoulder and shoot over people. So I don't think even many of those dribble jumpers will be beyond the arc.
Yeah, no, the significantly higher portion of them came from inside the arc. And shooting is that he is a good 3-point shooter, but in the way that I think of Brandon Miller. Brandon Miller is an all-encompassing good shooter. You put him in really any situation where he has to take a jump shot on a basketball court, whether that's off the dribble, going downhill, a baseline leaner from 15 feet, a free throw line pull-up, a spot-up three, a step-back three. He's good at all of those things. Risacher is primarily a spot-up threat. That is the best way to use him right now. And if you're an NBA team, drafting a guy who can really only hurt defenses off of the catch right now and doesn't have really the ability to take that and dribble, take 2 or 3 dribbles inside the arc and score that way, or create for his teammates really out of it either. It's a tough sell for me. But he is a very good shooter. His length and shot versatility and the mobility that he shows on the perimeter. He obviously has great touch too. He doesn't have bad misses. He never airballs it or shoots it long or bricks it off the corner of the backboard. They mostly just fall off the rim in some way or bounce around and come out when he misses, which is a very good sign to me. It shows that he can maintain his touch through pretty much any sort of movement, and any sort of contest that the defense might give, which he's actually a pretty good shooter on guarded catch and shoots as well. He's a 33% shooter on relatively high volume, because obviously teams know he can shoot, so he doesn't get a ton of open ones. Most of his open shots come in transition or off of a broken defensive play, I should say. But yeah, he's definitely a good shooter in the traditional sense, but he's not as well-rounded, I would say, as I would like to see from somebody that's at the tip top of the draft and is billed as maybe one of the best shooters in the draft, which, I mean, I don't know how many people are arguing that specifically in his case, but I think especially at the top, he would be considered one of those guys. And
I think for his size,
he just has a lot. Yeah, right.
Yeah, there'll be better shooters like Reed Shepherd and, but this guy is legit 6'10", and he plays, if he's not, he plays that size and he has length. I want to say, again, we don't have official measurements. I think he's got super long arms. I would not be surprised if he's got a 7'1" wingspan, something like that. So I think it's the combination of size and shooting, which I think is rare. But you are fair, right? He is not a guy who is gonna, if someone goes under on a pick and roll, he's gonna just pull it back and shoot it, like maybe someone like Nikola Topic was, who we discussed last week. But I do like his range of counters, and even though you could look at it and go, right, 40% of his shots were spot up threes, but I'd say 10% of those for the normal player, you would not be able to take a spot up three. But because he has such a quick release, because he has such good footwork, he's able to almost generate it into spot up threes. And I think that's a skill which is so subtle and nuanced that people probably aren't going to be able to counter for that as well. But I think for me, because I see him trying some of these high difficulty gradient aspects of jump shooting that I talked about earlier, like these no dip threes, super quick release, I just believe that he's going to get there. I think he's just beginning to tap into this shooting side of him. So look, definitely a good place to start because I think it's a huge strength. Let's go to another one of his strengths, his defense. I have to say there is not many people I've seen at this age who have the length like him who want to defend as much as him. I think I posted a clip the other week where he made 4 efforts. He picked a guard up full court, which is basically how he's been used all year, is being put on point guards, hassling point guards. He picked a guy at full court. Someone set a screen. He ended up dropping back with the big, kind of tagged the big through the lane. He then rotated out to a shooter. And not only then, the ball got passed to the corner to like the next guy, and he rotated out again, contested the shot. It just multiple efforts, super smart, plays team basketball, exceedingly well team basketball, and uses the length well. Like often switches on to bigs, and I think does a really, really good job kind of like battling with them, contesting post entries, things like that. I've been very impressed with his defensive side. Uses his length well, contests everything at the rim, like has two-handed, goes straight up, really does well to kind of come off and acts as that weak side defender. Can side with guards, can block them from behind, really fluid mover over and off screens, getting around them. Just a defensive Swiss Army knife. Like I think like the way I project him is like Herb Jones style defense. Okay, just versatile. You can put him on anyone. Like probably has like a similar frame in some ways to Herb Jones, maybe a little bit bigger. But this is what you're talking about. And again, I agree with you. Normally top 5, you're talking about a defensive 3-and-D stud. I think he's a bit more than that. But yes, you kind of are in this draft, because you don't have those like high usage Paolo Banchero types.
And that is a great point, because you just see what he has in terms of his like steal and block production too. Like he passes the eye test, very versatile. He's pretty mobile for his size, I think, is what makes up for like
agile, I would say.
Very agile. Yeah, he's very light on his feet, like flips his hips really quickly. He can get skinny like over screens much like easier and quicker than most other guys that are 6'10 or 6'9 can. And his like steal and block production in a pro league at his age is pretty impressive. Like he is going to be one of the younger players at the top of this draft. Like he's going to be, I think, 19 on draft day. There are a couple other 19-year-olds that are going to be 20, I think, before he turns 20. And then obviously guys like Donovan Clingan, Reed Shepherd, Dalton Connect are in their 20s already. So he has much more theoretically room to grow into his body and as a defender, just in terms of his experience level, than a lot of the guys around him here. And he still put up the 3rd most stocks on his team. He had 76 in 31 games this year. He has the 3rd most defensive rebounds. He has 143 in 31 games. And like, he's not playing against in the best, European league. And he plays in the Euro League, obviously, but on their domestic league in France isn't like, the best and the most talented or the most athletic. But as is the case with most of these leagues overseas, he's a 19-year-old playing against guys who have been grinding for the last 10 years to put food on their table for their families. In the case of the Americans or anybody that's not from France, you're from out of the country doing so. And he's not. He's a young French kid that's looking to go at the top of the NBA draft. And he is still producing in this way, in ways that are very difficult, or some of the most difficult ways to produce as a young player in a pro league. So that alone, I think, is a good sign on top of the good film that he's put out there.
And when I watch the film, I sometimes look and I'm like, why can't I find any plays where like teams are attacking Risacher? Like, and you look at it, he's a rookie. He's 19 years old. Okay. He was 18 when the season started, playing in France. He's playing against, adult men who've been playing for 10, 15 years. 7% of his defensive possessions are isolations against him. I mean, that is just code for like teams never attack the guy. They are trying to stay far, far away from Zaccharie Risacher because he is a hugely impactful defender. And it's just really clear. You're always trying to move him around, get the ball away from him because he has such a massive impact on the game. And again, that's nothing that's going to ever show up really on a stat sheet. It's not going to be a steal or a block, but that's everything that you need to know for someone of that size. Now, look, he's very skinny. He lacks a lot of strength. Okay, he's going to get to the NBA, and there's definitely going to be some challenges. But we talk about Herb Jones. He was someone who was super skinny. We see guys like Jaden McDaniels in Minnesota, another like guy who you'd probably describe as lean and skinny. And I think there is something about these wings that those kind of light frames enable them to be that agile, versatile defender. They can use their length well, even when they do have that strength disadvantage. So there's definitely going to be moments where he struggles on the interior. but that's pretty much every 19-year-old coming out of any draft cycle.
And for what it's worth, he does play with a high motor, like you said earlier. He's at least somebody that is going to try and be physical, even if it's not going to work. Even now, like in the French league, it doesn't work very often. I believe he grades out pretty well as a post-up defender if you look on Synergy, but the bad clips, the low lights are very low. Like it's just him getting completely moved out of the way. He lacks core strength in a very, very significant way right now. Like he has no ability to like get a lower center of gravity and actually hold it, just because even if he does get positioning, whatever guy that he's guarding is most likely stronger than him and is going to be able to just dislodge him from whatever position that he gained. But he is a very smart defender. He does have the length and size and athleticism. So if he can just get stronger, like he will be a good defender, probably at the very least in the NBA. And if he does get stronger and maintains all of that athleticism and instincts and all that stuff translates from the French league to the NBA, like he's going to be a very strong defensive asset on the wing with the ability to like switch up and down a little bit too, which really adds to like a layer of versatility to his game.
I mean, you talked about the motor, and it like as well as that, and it's related. He plays with like a passion and fire, which he wears his heart on his sleeve. Like when he has big plays, you can see it. When he messes up, you can see he's so frustrated and angry at himself. And he's so into the game. He's so into the moment. And I feel like he takes every single play personally and he really digs into it. And that pops through the film. Like I've heard him interviewed, comes across a pretty quiet, shy kid. Like not a great natural English speaker like some of the people. But this is a guy who came up through the Asvel Academy in France, which is, for those who might remember that name, is the team where Tony Parker came out of, and also where a certain Victor Wembanyama came out of, right? So that they breed them well out of Asvel, out of that academy, and he's done very well there. We talked about some of the weaknesses there in terms of the defense, in terms of the strength. You talked about some of the pull up, off the dribble shooting. Do you have any other kind of big concerns with Risacher when you look at him as a kind of a top of the draft prospect?
Yeah, the ability to create off the bounce is definitely worrying for me. Like I fully support the idea of taking him in the top 10, or especially if he falls out of the top 10, like at that point, that's a great value play. I just don't know if he could be somebody that could really break in and solidify himself as like a top 3 to 5 guy for me. You just need, at least you need the upside of being able to be somebody that's going to create off the dribble. I just think right now he doesn't have a great handle. It's just like, okay, very standard and like compact, tight to his body. He doesn't really have like any wiggle at all, despite like you may think that he would, because he's so mobile on the perimeter defensively, and without the ball in his hands, it doesn't really translate as a ball handler, which is like one of the hardest things in basketball, is to like be athletic with the ball in your hands in the same way that you are without it. But that's kind of what puts you at the top of the draft. Like just for example, like that's why I have Rob Dillingham above him, because Rob Dillingham is the same athlete with the ball as he is without the ball. He is also a very good shooter. He certainly has significant deficiencies, as I see you put your head in your hands right there. He has his deficiencies, but what those deficiencies do, if the rest of your game pans out, I think is not nearly as significant as it is with somebody like Risacher, who probably has a lower ceiling overall. And like if he doesn't improve in certain areas, like sorry, I had to cough there for a second, but if he doesn't improve in certain areas, like I also think he's a bit streaky of a shooter as well. So that kind of needs to iron itself out. And then he also would need to add something off the bounce. Like how many guys that are just pure spot up threats? Like I kind of liken him to like a bigger version of like Max Strus, obviously a way better defender, but offensively, very similar role. You would never draft Max Strus with better defense, like even if it's a lot better defense, inside the top 5, just because of the role that you're going to be able to put them in. Like you're never really going to be able to maximize like what you get out of that slot. And ideally in the top 5, you're drafting somebody that could at least be like a top 3 option on your team. And I just feel like Risacher, like while he does have like a pretty high floor, like maybe the highest floor of anybody in the top of this draft, especially for a wing, I don't know if that quite justifies like a relatively lower ceiling compared to other guys. That's not even like a concern about him as an individual, though. It's more like just him in the context of this draft. Because if he was in another draft, he would go 14th, and I'd be totally fine with it, you know?
So you said Max Strus. I'll throw back at you Desmond Bane, Mikal Bridges. That's what I see, and that's why I will have him higher ranked, okay? In terms of like elite defender, a guy who's probably going to be known for running around, catching the ball, screens, like can't do much if you just like isolate, but they leverage their off-ball threat to then get downhill and kind of make the right play. Rob Dillingham and Zaccharie Risacher, I think, are really two interesting contrasts. And you're right, he doesn't have much wiggle off the dribble. But I think this is almost a cultural thing between US style AAU basketball, which is the Rob Dillingham show, versus Zaccharie Risacher, who's grown up in the academy, where you run the plays, you make the right play, you don't isolate, do through the legs 3 times and take a step back jumper. You don't hold the ball for more than 2 seconds because you pass it, you move it on, and you cut, and that's what you do. And I think we're at an inflection point where we are seeing that have a bigger precedence and having more success in the NBA than the other side. So I think I agree. You look at the highlight videos, you are going to be blown away by Rob Dillingham. But this is an undersized combo card against a 6'10" wing who plays both ends of the floor. I just think it's a cultural thing that we're kind of like, some people are still struggling to see the differences between those two sides of things. That said, the passing is horrific. Like, I'm a Zaccharie Risacher fan, and like he has these drives where he just has these blinders on, and he just attacks the rim, and there are guys I think I clipped one out the other day. There was 3 guys condensed on him at the rim, and there was like 2 people open in the corner, and he could just made a simple pass out. He just did not see him and tried to basically finish through 3 guys. Absolute blinders. It is not something that I think he will ever be able to be a good passer of the basketball. Okay, he is going to be someone who will make simple, basic reads, and that would actually be progress. You talked about FIBA, how he's shown some of that, so maybe there's hopefully the chance that he can display that a little bit, but that's something that I've really have struggled with a little bit on that side of the tape. The passing, combined with the handle, he can't do anything off balance. He has to kind of be very well thought out in what he's going to do. He needs to get to his spots, which he does do well. Like, he gets to his pull up. He does try and avoid contact and drive. Sometimes likes to kind of stop and shoot over small players, which he'll be able to do in the NBA too, because he's absolutely huge. But yeah, sometimes gets sped up a little bit if people playing up on him. I think I've seen the knock on him being like a poor athlete. And I have to say, I just don't really see that. I think he lacks, like, maybe in the half court, but he's had some really explosive dunks. He's had some reverses. He's had quite a few missed dunks this year, which I love that he's going for them. I said to you beforehand, he's going to get a tech in the NBA from hanging on the rim, because when he gets going downhill, he pulls himself up and throws it on the rim. So you can clip that when he gets his first tech in the NBA, because that's definitely going to happen. But it is more of a transition kind of threat. Like, that's something where I probably do like him, is in transition. He cuts really well. He actually has like some really impressive drop steps and drives and giant Euro steps in transition, where he can kind of almost, I don't want to use the player I was going to use. Fuck it, let's say almost Giannis-esque.
Oh, here we go.
With how he takes 2 steps from the 3-point line and then gets to the rim. And he had a couple of plays like where he's in transition, takes like 2 Euros, he starts it, and then he's like at the rim. He's not anything like Giannis. But just in terms of, if I couldn't think of anyone else to liken him to those big Euro steps. But just like understanding of Euros and how to create a shot, it just makes me think there's more there in the half court to come when that game slows down from a little bit more.
I think that where that comes from, like he's not a great athlete, is he's like a functional basketball athlete, but he's not really explosive in any traditional term. Like, he does have some vertical pop to him, but mostly in transition. And he's not like, he doesn't have a first step really at all. Like, he's not like dusting guys off the dribble. And like that, I think, is what stands out mostly to people that don't like follow the draft like we do and do deep dives on these guys on film, like you don't see that he moves really well and is very light on his feet in traffic and can get really skinny over screens and is just generally good, like without the ball in his hands. Like I said earlier, when he does have the ball in his hands, oh, it is good. It's absolutely good. But it's like what you see the most is like where he has the most athletic shortcomings, I guess, is probably the best way to put it. And like that's not necessarily like fair to him, but it is going to give him the perception that he's not like a great athlete overall. But I think he's a good athlete in basketball terms. Like he's very mobile, he's thin, but he's long, like he's fluid with his feet. Like that's really all like a player like him needs to be able to do. Like he doesn't need to be blowing by people and then rising up to dunk over bigs like for his style of play. Like that's not really something he needs to add. Like he just kind of needs to refine what he's already good at and build
2 points
upon
is
that.
2 points.
Right, exactly. Like
it doesn't matter how it looks as long as it goes in.
Yeah, exactly.
And I would rather have a player who knows he isn't an on-ball player and plays to his strengths and does things for the team, rather than someone who, a little bit like Miles Bridges we saw this year, like trying to do stuff on the ball when it's like that's just not you, man. Like it's not gonna work this way. This isn't winning basketball with you being high usage. And he knows exactly who that is. And that's something Steve Clifford talked this year about Brandon Miller, how much he loved that he could play without the ball. And I don't think there's any on-ball players in this draft who should have the ball ahead of LaMelo Ball or Brandon Miller. I don't think there's a single one. So you are drafting complementary players to fit around that. And that brings us into our fit with the Charlotte Hornets, the last part of our analysis here. Chase, what do you think of the fit of Zaccharie Risacher with the Charlotte Hornets? You mentioned you have him probably like towards 10 in that area of your board. If you were to make a Charlotte Hornets only board, would he move up for you because of that fit?
100%. I actually think of any of the teams really in the entire lottery, like the Hornets might be one of the better teams for him to go to because he slots in at the 3, which I think is his natural position, like right away. Like if he lands in a certain spot, he may end up having to play the 4 a lot, when I think that is really going to magnify like just how thin he is right now and how much he struggles with physicality, especially at the highest level. Like if you put him at the 3, that's negated at least a little bit. He can use that speed in the open court and the agility that he has and just the overall like length and instincts and high motor and ability to create plays on defense, get rebounds and stuff like that. It's going to be much more I guess valuable in his position at the 3 than it would be at the 4. I think he's going to give up a lot more there. So that's right off the bat, like LaMelo, Brandon Miller, Risacher, like that is a very long, like mobile, agile lineup on the perimeter. And if he ends up being the shooter that he has shown that he can be at times in the French league, that is a very, very good shooting lineup as well. So if you have like active, lengthy defenders and then really good high volume perimeter shooters at your 1, 2, and 3, you make it so much easier to build like a bench unit and a front court around that. So like this is like, I think this would be a fantastic landing spot for him. And if the Hornets like maybe fall a little bit or the draft just doesn't fall their way with the players taken before them, like this is a very good match, I think, for team and player here. What about you, James?
And I think it's a fantastic fit. I agree with you. I think it's probably one of the best fits for any player. Maybe like Detroit is probably a good fit for Risacher as well, because like Cade's the number 1. Right. You know, he can be the defender, 3-point spacer there. But I think those are the best 2. We talked defensively. We've always said LaMelo Ball can't be the point of attack defender. Brandon Miller did it at times last year. I think he started the season well. I think as his offensive usage went up, that side of the ball for me dropped in the quality. I don't think he's someone you probably want in your primary like ball handler, point of attack defender every single time, especially not with the offensive load I expect him to carry. Risacher solves that problem. He allows you to play big because, like you say, Brandon Miller, LaMelo Ball, because he can guard point guards. He's shown that. So you play him at the 3, you can place him on the point guards, then you can put Brandon Miller on maybe one of the bigger wings, and LaMelo Ball on whoever is the kind of the worst offender, either at the 2 or the 4. It's a really seamless fit. And this team needs defense, it needs shooting, and those are 2 things that he adds. I think you have the playmaking that you need in that for a good offense with LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller. And he gives you, again, like an off-ball, off-screen threat. And we've seen some the best offenses, the Denver Nuggets, the Warriors in their peak. They get good offense by running a lot of kind of off-ball action, okay? Getting people coming off stagger screens, getting people coming off split cuts. Even the Kings have used that a lot, and able to kind of like move the ball, leveraging outside shooting. And with Brandon Miller and Risacher, you have two threats who can do that off the catch. Even like you've got Seth Curry, you can even count into that group as well. So I think this is one of the probably the single cleanest fit. I'd say even better than Sarr, just because, like we say, if he's playing power forward, you've got a non-shooter at the 5 with Mark Williams. I think this is the cleanest fit that we've discussed so far out of Topic, Sarr. So I expect Risacher to be getting a very, very close look. Although I will say, like, I just don't think you talked about going later in the draft. I don't think Risacher is going to get out the top 3, personally, because, I mean, I've taken part in some kind of community mock drafts this year already. And it's only when you start doing these mock drafts that you start going, where's this guard going to go? Well, they've already got 2 guards there. They're going to give playing time. There just aren't enough wings, Chase. Like, people kind of like, they remember, but then they also forget that wings who can defend and shoot, who are 6'10", just don't grow on trees. And I think for that reason, I didn't see him getting outside of the top 3, especially if he continues to play and play well, because he's kind of come back on a little bit after a cold stretch.
That's a great point. Him being a wing and filling the archetype that is arguably like the most valuable in the NBA, especially for a role player, just a guy that's 6'9", can move his feet, can shoot, can defend, and is a smart player on both ends of the court. Like, that is something that every single team needs, and you need more than one of those players in your rotation, really. So, and for this draft, it's long been established that there aren't going to be that many stars, most likely. So there's definitely something to be said for taking players that, especially in a Hornets context, that you know are going to fit well with the roster that you already have, and will also fit on a roster however you choose to build it going forward, which there aren't that many players, especially at the top of this draft, that you can say that about. Risacher is one of them.